Zach the History Dog here, and I got a story for you. So sit back, close your eyes, and listen to the tale of John Simpson Kirkpatrick. He lived the 6th of July 1892 to the 19th of May 1915, commonly known as John Simpson, was a stretcher bearer with the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance during the Gallipoli campaign, the Allied attempts to capture Constantinople, capital of the Ottoman Empire, during the First World War. After the landing at Anzac Cove on the 25th of April 1915, Simpson used donkeys to provide first aid and carry wounded soldiers to the beach, from where they could be evacuated. He continued this work for 3.5 weeks, often under fire, until he was killed by machine gun fire during the third attack on Anzac Cove. Simpson and his donkey have become part of the Anzac legend. Simpson was born on the 6th of July 1892 in a Happy Street, Tyne Dock, South Shields, 1 County Durham, England, to Scottish parents, Sarah and Robert Kirkpatrick. He was one of 8 children and worked with donkeys as a youth during summer holidays. He attended Barnes Road Junior School and later Mortimer Road Senior School. At 16, as British Army Reserve units were known at the time, and in early 1909 he joined the British Merchant Navy. In May 1910, Simpson deserted his ship at Newcastle, New South Wales, and traveled widely in Australia, taking on various jobs, such as cane cutting in Queensland and coal mining in the Illawarra district of New South Wales in the 3 or so years leading up to the outbreak of the First World War. He worked as a steward, stoker, and greaser on Australian coastal ships. Simpson held or developed left-wing political views while he worked in Australia, and wrote in a letter to his mother, "I often wonder when the working men of England will wake up and see things as other people see them. What they want in England is a good revolution, and that will clear some of these millionaires and lords and dukes out of it, and then with a Labour government they will almost be able to make their own conditions." According to former Union leader Alf Rankin, there is anecdotal evidence that Simpson belonged to the Industrial Workers of the World, a radical international labor union, although that has never been confirmed by historical documents or other sources. Simpson enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force after the outbreak of war, apparently as a means of returning to England. He enlisted as John Simpson and may have dropped his real surname to avoid being identified as a ship deserter. Simpson enlisted as a field ambulance stretcher bearer, a role only given to physically strong men, on the 23rd of August 1914 at Swan Barracks, Francis Street, in Perth, and undertook training at Black Boy Hill Training Camp. He was assigned to the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance and the Regimental No. 202. Simpson landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula on the 25th of April 1915 with the 3rd Field Ambulance as part of the 1st Australian Division. In the early hours of the following day, as he was bearing a wounded comrade on his shoulders, he spotted a donkey and quickly began making use of it to carry his fellow soldiers. Simpson would sing and whistle, seeming to ignore the bullets flying through the air. While he tended to his comrades, he used at least 5 different donkeys, known as Duffy No. 1, Duffy No. 2, Murphy, Queen Elizabeth, and Abdul at Gallipoli. Some of the donkeys were killed and or wounded in action. He and the donkeys soon became a familiar sight to the Anzacs, many of whom knew Simpson by the nicknames such as Scotty in reference to his ancestry and Simmy. Simpson himself was also sometimes referred to as Murphy. Other Anzac stretcher bearers began to emulate Simpson's use of the donkeys. Colonel later General John Monash wrote, "Private Simpson and his little beast earned the admiration of everyone at the upper end of the valley. They worked all day and night throughout the whole period since the landing, and the help rendered to the wounded was invaluable." Simpson knew no fear and moved unconcernedly amid shrapnel and rifle fire, steadily carrying out his self-imposed task day by day, and he frequently earned the applause of the personnel for his many fearless rescues of wounded men from areas subject to rifle and shrapnel fire. Other contemporary accounts of Simpson at Gallipoli speak of his bravery and invaluable service in bringing wounded down from the heights above Anzac Cove through shrapnel and Monash gullies. However, his donkey service spared him the even more dangerous and arduous work of hauling seriously wounded men back from the front lines on a stretcher. On the 19th of May 1915, during the third attack on Anzac Cove, Simpson was killed by machine gun fire. Private Victor Laidlaw, with the 2nd Field Ambulance, wrote in his diary of Simpson's death, "Another fatality I found out today was a private in the 1st Field Ambulance. He had been working between the base and the firing line bringing down wounded on a donkey. He had done invaluable service to our cause. One day he was bringing down a man from the trenches and coming down an incline he was shot right through the heart. It is regretted on all sides as this chap was noticed by all, and everybody got to know him. One couldn't miss him as he used to always work with his donkey, cheerful and willing. This man goes to his death as a soldier. He was survived by his mother and sister, who were still living in South Shields. He was buried at the beach cemetery." Soon after his death, Simpson was being conflated with at least one other stretcher bearer using a donkey around Anzac Cove. Richard Alexander Henderson, of the New Zealand Medical Corps. Henderson said later that he had taken over one of Simpson's donkeys, known as Murphy. One of the paintings by Horace Moore depicting a man and a donkey, formerly thought to be a portrait of Simpson, now known to portray Henderson. An iconic image of Henderson with a donkey at Gallipoli has often been wrongly assumed to portray John Simpson Kirkpatrick. The image originated in a photograph taken by Sergeant James G. Jackson of the NZMC on the 12th of May 1915, a week before Simpson's death. The image became famous after Horace Moore Jones, a New Zealand artist who had been a member of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force at Gallipoli, painted at least 6 versions of it. Following the death of Simpson, Henderson continued to rescue wounded soldiers from the battlefield and was later awarded the Military Medal. Moore Jones' paintings have usually been referred to by titles such as Private Simpson, DCM, and his donkey at Anzac or the man with the donkey. Many derivatives of the image, including sculptures, have appeared, and a variation of it was included on 3 postage stamps issued in Australia in 1965 to mark the 50th anniversary of Gallipoli. On the 5-penny, 8-penny, and 2 shillings, and 3-pence stamps, the legend surrounding Simpson, sometimes under the misnomer Murphy, grew largely from an account of his actions published in a 1916 book, Glorious Deeds of Australasians in the Great War. This was a wartime propaganda effort, and many of its stories of Simpson supposedly rescuing 300 men and making dashes into no man's land to carry wounded out on his back are demonstrably untrue. In fact, transporting that many men down to the beach in the 3 weeks that he was at Gallipoli would have been a physical impossibility, given the time the journey took. However, the stories presented in the book were widely and uncritically accepted by many people, including the authors of some subsequent books on Simpson. A silent film based on Simpson's exploits, Murphy of Anzac, was released in 1916. His life inspired the 1938 radio play The Man with the Donkey. In 1965, in the lead-up to the 50th anniversary of Gallipoli, there were calls for a commemorative medal for veterans of the Gallipoli campaign or the award of a late Victoria Cross to Simpson. Both proposals were rejected by the Australian federal government in 1965. In January 1966, Robert Menzies, who had been Prime Minister of Australia since 1949, retired and was replaced by Harold Holt. The new government soon announced that Australia would present to Australian Army and Royal Australian Navy veterans of the Gallipoli campaign in 1915 an Anzac commemorative medal. Both living veterans and next of kin of deceased veterans could apply for the medallion, but only living veterans would receive a lapel badge. The first medallions were issued to Gallipoli veterans shortly before Anzac Day 1967. The medallion and lapel badge feature Simpson and his donkey. They were also portrayed on a series of Anzac postage stamps issued on the 14th of April 1965. In 1977, a donkey joined the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps under the name Jeremiah Simpson with the rank of private and the regimental number MA0090 in 1986. This particular donkey was permanently adopted as the official mascot of the Corps. Simpson featured in an episode of the television show Michael Willis's Australians called Private John Simpson in 1988. At least 2 songs have been written about him: John Simpson Kirkpatrick by Issy and David Emine with Kate Reyes on the album Legends and Lovers, and Jackie and Murphy by Martin Simpson on the album Vagrant Stanzas. The Australian RSPCA, in May 1997, posthumously awarded its Purple Cross to the donkey Murphy for performing outstanding acts of bravery towards humans. In 2011, a play by Valerie Laws entitled The Man and the Donkey premiered at the Customs House in South Shields. The part of John Simpson Kirkpatrick was played by local actor Jamie Brown. On the 19th of May 2015, the Australian High Commissioner, Alexander Downer, visited South Shields as part of special celebrations marking 100 years to the day that John Simpson Kirkpatrick was killed in action. There have been several petitions over the decades to have Simpson awarded a Victoria Cross or a Victoria Cross for Australia. There is a persistent myth that he was recommended for a VC, but that this was either refused or mishandled by the military bureaucracy. However, there is no documentary evidence that such a recommendation was ever made. The case for Simpson being awarded a VC is based on diary entries by his commanding officer that expressed the hope he would receive either a Distinguished Conduct Medal or VC. However, the officer in question never made a formal recommendation for either of these medals. Simpson's mention in dispatches was consistent with the recognition given to other men who performed the same role at GALLIPOLI. In April 2011, the Australian government announced that Simpson would be one of 13 servicemen examined in an inquiry into unresolved recognition for past acts of naval and military gallantry and valor. The tribunal for this inquiry was directed to make recommendations on the awarding of decorations, including the Victoria Cross. Concluding its investigations in February 2013, the tribunal recommended that no further award be made to Simpson, since his initiative and bravery were representative of all other stretcher bearers of 3rd Field Ambulance, and that bravery was appropriately recognized as such by the award of an Well, that was the story of John Simpson Kirkpatrick. But do not take my word for it. Look him up and enjoy history.